Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode, the Profit One of the Women Talking About Learning podcast. I'm Andrew Jacobs. In this episode, we have two expert guests who discuss the significance of profit in small businesses, the challenges of changing ingrained attitudes towards money, and the role of learning and development in driving business growth. Our first guest is Kasey Anton. Kasey is the brains behind Spark Business Consulting and the author of Profit First for Restaurants. Through her work at Spark Business Consulting, she has identified winning and losing strategies across a range of industries, becoming a sought-after expert for entrepreneurs and business owners alike. She is passionate about making numbers approachable, her business is profitable, and when she's not advising clients, speaking at conferences, or having fun on podcasts, she's busy being a mum and an adjunct professor at Boston University. Our second guest is Rachel Smith. Rachel is Head of Strategy at Black Bullion, and is responsible for exploring ways to deliver financial literacy, work-based learning, and other support to students across the UK. Black Bullion are a flourishing startup with a strong commercial strategy, but also with a mission of social impact and value. Recorded in December of 2024, this is Women Talking About Learning. This is Rachel and Kasey talking about profit.
Hi, Kasey. So why did you choose to talk about profit and learning?
Hi, Rachel. Why did I choose to talk about profit and learning? This is what I've been doing with my life for the last 18 years is teaching people, my clients, small businesses in a variety of industries, mainly hospitality, but in a variety of industries, about profit. Because when I used to own restaurants here in Boston, Massachusetts, I did not understand what profit was at all. Eventually got out of the industry, decided to do something else. Working with small businesses, I suddenly learned, like a light bulb moment, not only what profit was, but how and why it is so necessary for small businesses, and everybody was missing the mark on that. So I've dedicated the last 18 years of my life to really teaching small businesses what it is, why a business needs it to survive, let alone thrive. And it's what gets me out of bed in the morning. It's what I would do for free if I could work for free. It would be all about teaching entrepreneurs about profit.
Well, that's incredible. So how do you go about breaking down attitudes to profit and how to go about making it?
I'm not even sure I could say I'm the expert on that. Or I don't even know if there is an expert on that. If there is, it isn't me. That is a hard one to break down. But here's how I do it. I wouldn't say that I have 100% success rate at it because people have such ingrained philosophies and relationships with money that can be very, very difficult to chip away at or to break in. But for the ones that are open and willing to learn another way, I teach them about profit, not only from reading a financial standpoint and making it easy to understand the financials and how they work and why they're so important, but really just by doing it using money. You know, profit, in the end, profit is all about the money your business produces. Basically, if your business was to print money, it's the money your business prints that you get to go use. So if I can try and make some visuals to small business owners about that and teach them, like, this is what we're trying to do. And here, let's use some bank accounts and leverage the way that you're currently viewing money to view it so that profit becomes first, because it is that important, and getting them to buy into what profit serves in a business. If I can do that, and I have been successful. I wouldn't say I'm 100% at all, but I've done that. Then I can start changing people's relationship with money, with profit, and with their business.
I mean, it's an interesting thought, isn't it? Because there's the book by Morgan Housel, The Psychology of Money, where he talks about how we grow up impacts our relationship with money.
Yes.
And how you can almost become embarrassed by the making of it, or ashamed of the making of it, because of the way that you've been brought up. And what I find when I'm working with people in the learning and development space is that they find it almost offensive to link what they're doing to the making of profit. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, it not only makes sense. I see it all the time. So I completely agree. I see it in business owners. I see it all the time, and I would definitely agree that it has to come from their upbringing around money. And I find that fascinating. But at the end of the day, as they say, a business cannot survive, let alone thrive, but it just can't survive without it. So it's that mindset shift that I have to work on making with people who want to have their business and even be moderately successful, let alone wildly successful, is that they have to change that relationship with money, because they just can't service anybody without it, without the profit.
It's really strange, isn't it? That it's become almost like another sort of like human entity in our lives that we have to learn to live with and to love, or to at least be okay around, isn't it? This concept of money making. I work for an organisation now that tries to teach financial literacy to young people, and there's such a dysfunction, some sort of not workingness about the way that young people are being brought into the world of money. And it's just really exciting to be in a place now to give them healthier attitudes to money and money making.
Yeah, I same. I volunteered at my kids' high school a couple of years ago to teach in an accounting marketing class. Because for that exact reason, Rachel, I'm like, I really want to give these students, these kids, another view, another set of eyes on what money really means and could mean to them as they want to pursue their passions or go to work in the world. And these were juniors and seniors in high school. And we started a business together, and it was really fascinating to watch some of them really come alive when they started to understand how it all works. But I think maybe even more fascinating, or just, I don't know if the word fascinating is the right word to use here, is the hesitation that it seemed every student had to even talk about money, like it was a swear word, like it was a dirty word in some way. It was, and that, of course, that must come from their parenting, the upbringing. It has to, like, where else would it come from? So I'm assuming it does. And I find that interesting. And that's how I was raised as well. But I completely changed the way I talk about money with my kids. And I don't know if that's for good or for bad, but I just decided to do it a different way.
One of my a lot of my colleagues are much younger than I am. I think I'm about 20 years older than the average age of the people within the company. And there is it's almost a choice that they think you have to make, which is you can be a capitalist or you can be a good person. So one of the really interesting conversations I'm trying to have with them as within the organization is this idea of ethical capitalism, that it's absolutely possible to do good and make money. And in fact, the making of money is usually the only way that good things have ever happened in the world, in the scheme of things. So getting over their reticence to make really sound, commercially strategic decisions is really hard, because they think it's counterintuitive to doing good for our market.
They do. And as a matter of fact, along the same lines, that I just mentioned, I volunteered at the high school. I now am an adjunct professor at Boston University, and I teach an accounting managerial class. And there are some students, and these are juniors and seniors in college now for this semester, that have that same type of mindset. Because we were doing a small business project. I forget which project we were on, and I had a little bit of pushback from some of the students about something about, they were thinking like, well, these kids, we're talking about restaurants and like the bussers and the food runners, they can't make a living unless the business pays them, whatever it was, $80,000 a year. And my standpoint was just a very black and white one. I'm like, okay, well, this small restaurant can't afford to pay a busser $80,000 a year. And they're like, but they can't live. And it was just like this little back and forth, which was interesting, because they were so almost anti-capitalistic, or, maybe not anti, but uncapitalistic to say, like, I just think the business should pay everyone what they need to pay to pay their bills. And I was on the other viewpoint, like, the business can only afford so much. So I guess in a way I was trying to get them to kind of separate the two thoughts. And they don't necessarily have to be mutually exclusive, except for the business model can only afford to pay so much. So let's do the best that we can with that model so that business can survive. It can create jobs and everybody's happy. But if the business tries to pay everybody $1 million, like, it's not going to survive 2 days. And then nobody's happy. Nobody has jobs. And so it was getting them to kind of put the two together. 'Cause to your point is, you can be good and capitalistic at the same time. As a matter of fact, like, I think a lot of good can come from that, more so than the opposite. And but you're right, there was a mindset there among some of these students. They just weren't getting it.
Yeah, it's like the way that I try and speak to them about it is that anything that they put forward has to come with a business case. So we can't just do it for doing its sake.
Yes.
They have to. I mean, and I used to do this in my previous role as an L&D lead, where, and it's strange how it used to offend people, where I'd used to say, if you take person X from this skill set and take them to person Y with this enhanced skill set, you've actually invested in the company. You've actually made the human capital resource of this company more valuable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It absolutely makes sense. That's even going even beyond, I think, the numbers, but it all comes back to that as well. But absolutely. And I think that is something that I've also been trying to kind of teach my kids. I have 2 kids, 14 and 18. In that way, as they, my 18-year-old, he's on his 3rd job now. My 14-year-old's about to get our first job. But in the same light, I'm trying to teach them, like, everybody has, of course, everyone has value, but when it comes to the workplace, bring your value and the different values of different people, you bring them together, and that alone can create not only magic, it can create an incredible work environment, a business working model that can do so many more great things. But it is about everyone bringing whatever their true value is the wrong word to use there, but their strength, their skill, and it doesn't have to be the same as everybody else's, because if you combine them all, then that's an unstoppable business right there.
But it's also I don't know if you have ever worked in L&D in a big corp.
No, I've never worked at a big company. Nope.
It's an almost siloed position that L&D takes, and it's like it feels like fast food. So a department within the business puts in an order and you fulfill it, like you're putting fries on the tray or burger on the tray, and off you go. You deliver your course. Mm-hmm. And there is no strategic nous around it. There's no pre-thought or pre-idea. And so what I've always thought is that if L&D want a different situation than that in the business, then they have to be willing to be engines of revenue delivery or engines of business growth, if they want it to be different to being the McDonald's of the learning world. So rather than take the orders and deliver the course, they look at the business case for the organization. They attend strategic meetings. They're part of the C-suite, and they understand the business case for all the decisions that they're making. And then they have every right to then demand a status within the business because they're revenue generators. I was talking to a manager to a young guy called Elliot, who is an awesome talent, but has fallen into the same sort of background of thinking that learning is something that you just deliver to people, and it's a sort of noble act to learn. And I'm like, no, you are actually the core revenue generation of this business, and you have to acquire your customer, you have to keep your customer, and then you have to show them the value you've delivered, because you are a profit generator. And that's really alien, I think, to most L&D, in terms of if they moan about their position, but they're not willing to take on that role within the business.
That is fascinating. It's so interesting that you say that. You know, I have a very different perspective when it comes to this only because I have only worked in small business I have never worked in a company big of any kind. So so that's what I know. And because I've always been in small business, you know, businesses definitely less than 50 employees, and that would be on the big side for me. Everyone kind of has a seat at the table in a way. For the most part, you have a seat at the table. So, you know, any type of learning development, anything is just, if you're going to do that, and it's kind of rare in small business because, you know, they're just putting out fires everywhere. But if you're able to do that, of course, it's going to have the direction of it's going to put out you know, you're going to take the lowest hanging fruit and really benefit that business in that way. And that's just how it grows. That's just how a small business operates, right? So that you're mentioning you know, on the bigger scale and saying it's not really done as intentionally as that. And I always wondered if that were the case. I'm getting into teaching about publicly traded companies with my class. I'm learning along with them because, again, I have no experience. So I'm learning from my research, and I'm questioning a lot of the things that I find in terms of leadership and et cetera going on there. Because I think it speaks to your point that you're saying is, like, you know, sometimes it's learning, you're just learning for learning's sake, and here you go. But if there's no tie-in to how it's going to help the business grow, thrive, meet its goals, whatever it is, then it's almost fruitless at that point. I mean, I think it is. So it's just interesting that
I think it's actually a little.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think it's actually even a little bit more worthless than that. Not to be too controversial, it's not all worthless, but there is a lot of tick boxing. There's a lot of compliance training. There's a lot of, you have to do X amount of hours in the CPD. How are you going to get that? And people just trying to quickly fill their store of learning before the year is up. So there is nothing necessarily particularly strategic about it. I mean, my last business I worked for was a small business, and I was at because it was a learning delivery model, I was at the heart of everything that was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt very central, and it was a very privileged position. But in a much more corporate world, I am a siloed department that's trying to fill it all up.
Huh. That's so interesting to me. To what end? And how did it ever get to that point? I mean, every business started out small, I'm assuming, right? They all started out small and then grew. So did they grow so big that they just didn't know what to do with all this people or all this money, whatever it is? So then they just created the silos and said, just go do something with that. Like, how did anyone take their eye off the bottom line, like literally the bottom line, because that's the fuel for the fire?
Well, part of me feels it's because when you're a learning and development specialist, you don't see yourself part of the corporate world as such, maybe. I mean, this is hugely generalizing, and I'm sure there's a lot out there that do see themselves as business people within a business function. But a lot of L&D are learning specialists first and happen to work in a business second.
Okay, yeah.
So it's about understanding that learning for learning's sake is a noble act. Lifelong learning is the way to help you get to your purpose. But within a business, it should be a function of growth for the organization and an unlocking of future profit potential. And I think the most successful learning operatives would be able to position themselves within the business with that thought. How can I strategically move this workforce on so that we are, I don't know, protected from risk in the future?
Right. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
The most amazing strategic decision making. So yeah, and I'm quite passionate about this. I just find it really, I find the idea of, I think it's both destructive and naive to believe that learning should just exist because everyone has a right to learning.
And that it should be paid for by somebody else. Right.
Exactly. That sense of entitlement that I'm allowed. And then everyone hates it because everyone remembers learning to be like school. Right. So then you resent receiving it. So this whole seemingly negative, toxic cycle that goes on. And so I feel quite passionate about the idea that we have to change, partly back to what you were saying about the psychology of it, but this time the psychology of our place within a company in order to make the whole company work, no matter what role we've taken on.
Right.
So how would you, how could we change the mindset of people within business to be, for every function, to be profit focused, do you think?
It's a great question. I think the first thing that just popped into my head is starting that within the schools. And so I'm feeling, at least here in America, and in the way the public school system works, is profit is definitely a dirty word there, it seems like. So there's not a lot of teaching about a P&L or a balance sheet, et cetera. There's not a lot of learning about financials at all. So I feel like perhaps if there's more of an element of how a business functions, and in no way to say like, hey, go out, kids, and start this business and you're going to be a gazillionaire. I'm not even close to even thinking that. I'm thinking you might have a great idea to build a company, and of course it has to have profit to survive, but then you look at all these things you could do with profits. You could start nonprofits, and you can go, help other parts of the world, or really, if your vision is that you want to help impoverished or go into inner cities, help the homeless, then you can do that as a byproduct if you create this amazing business, something along those lines, because I think you can feed both. I think you can feed these kids to understand about how a business works, that they're not all charities. They can't just hire everyone that they like and pay them whatever they need to be paid, because a business doesn't function that way. A business can only afford certain things, but within that, if you can stay in those guidelines and you can produce profit, then you can take that profit, you can use it to grow the business, and you can take the growth of that profit and you can use it to do so many other wonderful things, giving back things, charitable things. The whole world can rise from it. I do think it needs to start younger, and I think that's probably why I started getting into teaching a few years ago, as I'm like the back 9 retirement years of my life, and I don't want to retire, is that I want to see if we can kind of ingrain a new mindset around profit, around money in the youth, so that, in a few decades from now, it may be a different world and less businesses close and more things can pop up and help everyone.
It's actually really interesting you say that, because that's it's really exciting being new to an organization and getting to I don't know, influence the way that we speak about things. So our big focus is on students in universities and helping them become financially literate so that they can go into the workplace feeling competent and not debt ridden and all of that sort of thing. And one of my big things is that we tend to victimize them and almost turn them into infants in terms of their use of money. So, you haven't got a lot, it must be awful, your mental health must be really challenged by that sort of conversation. And I'm really interested in changing that a little bit towards, but you've got everything you need within you to be responsible for getting the money you need to invest in your education. So you can get a small part-time job and manage your learning. Everyone did it. Everyone's done it. It's not meant to be easy to get a degree. That's why you get to wear a funny hat right at the end of it and have a party.
That's right.
And there's so many opportunities to be entrepreneurial now that you don't even have to go into a full-time job. You can get yourself a side hustle and fund your own education. But the point being, I think, is that change in mindset away from it should be paid for me, this should be easy, give me money, to I'm investing in my future, I need to find the money to invest in it. And it's that shift that I'm interested in, of giving them the power to believe not only should they take responsibility, but they have the power to take that responsibility.
Yeah. So this is interesting because you're 100% right. I am finding that as well with the students I work with my own kids in that way. But I did not think about it that at all as I was going through high school and, getting myself into college. And I always worked and paid for college and paid for all the fun, stuff that I wanted to do in college. It was never even occurred to me in my head that it wasn't 100% on me, even though I had parents at home, working parents that were, and it never thought, I never would have thought to go to them and ask them for money. Their money was their money and I had to go make my own. But I don't find that to be how most kids think this way at all. I'm not sure what happened with that flicking of the switch there. And you're right. And I see it all the time, more often than not. As a matter of fact, the very few kids that I can see are doing it themselves, have that mindset, are the ones that really stand out like beyond measure to me, because I'm thinking, oh, that kid's got it. That kid's got that mentality. They got that work ethic that I'm just not finding with this other 100 kids that I see.
Yeah, and it didn't used to be unique. I mean, it's easy to be nostalgic and say it was never like that when I was a kid. But I was like you. I always presumed I was going to have to work my way through. And it's, I think it's one of those things where when you're a kid and you've had to struggle, you don't want that for your kids. So you do the opposite. And so therefore the next generation that comes along is a rebellion of the generation before. Like in some respects, I was almost like a rebellion of the greedy 1980s, where it's suddenly not acceptable to be that greedy and be that ruthless and to want to make money no matter what. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And therefore you become overly ethical. So it might be that we struggled so hard, we didn't want that for our kids, and now we've gone too far, and now they've not got the sense of ownership or empowerment to believe they could do it for themselves.
And along the same lines, I read something very recently about this topic. It was a very brief thing, but what I took away from it was that, I'm 51, as I see, my kids are in their late teens. And when they were young, as I was bringing them up, that was really the beginning of the 24/7 news cycle. Right. And social media and internet and all that. And so that was the beginning of that. And what I read in this article was that because as parents of young kids at this time, we were able to see all the, horrible things going on around the world. And that we just, without realizing it, were, helicoptering or just really trying to shade our kids from all of these atrocities. And like I said, without even realizing it, we were sort of protecting them from the big, bad, ugly world that we were now seeing 24/7. And from that, we raised a generation of, kind of afraid to go out and go get it, which it's so odd to me because I feel like I was the opposite of a helicopter parent. I feel like I was, but kind of looking back on that error of my kids being young, I'm thinking, maybe I am guilty of that. Maybe I did do that. As I had said earlier, I tried to raise my kids differently around money than I was raised, but what I did is I brought them into my business. I was kind of showing them financials. They were probably too young to understand it, but I was trying to introduce them to it. And I gave them very small profit sharing early on so they would understand, hey, mommy works really hard. This is what mommy does. Here's our office. This is what this means. I mean, I tried to do it from that angle in little bite-sized pieces, thinking like I was going to raise them to understand how the mechanics of a business works. It's too soon to tell if that was successful or not. Right now, I'm leaning toward it was not successful. But you never know. You never know. Because I'm very critical of my kids, but I have to say my closest friends and family are thinking like, oh, no, your kids see exactly what you do. They know. So and I hope they're right.
Well, to be fair, having been a secondary school teacher for about 20 years, teenagers are always contrary to what you want them to be when they're actually thinking exactly what you want them to think. So they just pretend. I'm rebelling against you, but actually I completely agree with you. I don't want to make your life easy. It's interesting about the idea of gender and profit, though, because when I've just done a recent piece of research looking at how sort of like 18 to 26-year-olds view how well off they are. And all the students believe they don't have enough, but don't we all, to be fair? I meet a millionaire and they'll say they want to be a billionaire.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure. But women in the study always invariably want £200 greater safety net than the men. So the men's gap is around about £250 that they perceive they've got in terms of what they need to have enough. The women's is closer to £600. And I just find that really interesting how I don't know whether that's... I didn't really want to comment on that when I was writing the report because it felt like it was hugely generalising. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on why it might be that women might need that bigger, safe, or need more security around money.
Wow, I did not know that's what you found. Although, as it's settling into my brain right now, I'm not that surprised. The first thing I'm thinking is women are smarter. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but here's what I'm basing that statement on is of the almost 260 clients that we have in my firm right now, the women-owned businesses far outreach the men in terms of how they're doing from a financially standpoint. And I would say they are conservative in the way that you're saying that as well, or they're just conservative or smarter. I don't really know. Like they just, they do. They are more cautious, yet they grow strategically. I'm not really sure what it is, but I'm agreeing with the findings that you saw because I see it every single day.
I mean, when I was analysing it, I didn't know whether it was, my first thought was incredibly sexist, which was women quite are not willing to compromise on some of the other things that men of that age are willing to compromise on. So, like personal hygiene. So my head went there first of all, which is less theoretical than where you went. But then I started to go down the line of thinking that maybe women just get it more, and they're aware of the budgeting and the pocketbook management more, or maybe just that men are braver. I mean, I don't know. It was I didn't write any of these conclusions in the report because I genuinely didn't know. But I did extrapolate to that and think all of the major billionaires in the world are mostly male. But I don't know whether that's societal and cultural. Who knows?
I would definitely believe that men are more apt to take risks, and with risk can come great rewards or not. So I think that they're definitely, I think what I'm seeing is men will take a lot more risks. So if you're going to take more risks, you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. Therefore, maybe you need less of that nest egg type thing because you've won some and you've lost some. Or women are more, and I know that I operate that way where I'm a little bit of a hoarder when it comes to cash and assets and things because for me it's different. And I wonder if some of the women were, if this makes even sense, if they were, married or in relationships at that time, because I know for me personally, I was getting divorced early on when my kids were young, and I just remember my mind switching into high gear, like this is all on me now. I don't have a partner to share this with. I got to go full tilt out and make sure that I can pay for all the things my kids are never going to go without, is what I was thinking, because I failed at a marriage. That's where I was going in my head. So then that's when my business took off, was I think really around the time that my marriage was not taking off. And ever since then, I find that I have a very different kind of relationship and mindset around money, because it's like, it's all on me. It's 100% on me. So I have to make sure I'm safe from every angle.
You see, that's exactly the view I take, that it's all on me. And I work incredibly hard and unwaveringly hard in the belief that I have to fill my bank account and create my own security. But it is me creating security. It's not me creating wealth for myself.
Yep. Same here. Exactly. That's what it is. I am creating security. I'm not. Yep. Yeah, I would agree with that 100%.
it's not a status symbol for me. And again, it's very hard to talk about this in a gendered way. It just happens that we're both female, and there might be a male somewhere that equally would only do it for security. Do you see what I mean? But it's I wonder how that then translates into business, because having obviously worked with both genders and both genders in very money-making roles. Again, huge generalization, but men are much more willing to make the harder decision than women, who want to make a much more human, softer decision sometimes. Again, is that a fair generalization?
No, I'm not finding the women make the softer decision, unless we're thinking of soft in a different way. I think that women don't need as much of the ego boost. I think that they are okay with taking a beat, taking a breath, making more of a strategic, looking at every angle, and more importantly, listening to others, surrounding themselves with people who know more, do more, have whatever, just taking on the right advice and bringing that into their strategy and their decision making. I find women do that much more often overall than the men, or at least in my viewpoint of the clients, and by now thousands I've worked with over the last 18 years, where men feel like they have to be all to end all, know every answer, know everything, are less likely to surround themselves with others who are smarter, may know more, may do more. So that, I think that's the difference with women, that they're willing to take the advice and to really just know that they don't need to know everything. They don't know everything.
And in fact, that's actually a harder position to take. It's, again, when I was coaching some of the, I want to call them kids. I really shouldn't. They're actually adults. It's just that I'm old. When I'm coaching them, it's like, it's all right to take a risk and potentially fail. It's worse not to take the risk and fail anyway. Do you see what I mean? So it's partly to do with courage and mindset again. We're back to the beginning.
I agree with that, and I'd also say, especially in small business, probably in large business too, is that you don't. I'd say the number one piece of advice, if somebody were to ask me, what I would give for that is, you're not supposed to know everything. You don't need to know everything. There are other people who know the things that you don't. Just so to stay in your zone of genius, stay in that, hire or not even, I'm not talking about money. So maybe even go out and find mentors, other people, other establishments that can help you in the areas that you're weaker or just don't like as much, and just surround yourself with the right people. And then that is how I believe that you grow the best type of strongest, strategic, financially stable business. It's the business owners who feel like they have to know it all, do it all, be it all. Those are the ones that drown.
And I guess if we were going to draw one big conclusion to everything we've been saying as we come to a close, is that profit is not a bad word. Strategic is the right way of going about making that profit, and just check your relationship with money along the way to see if it's creating obstacles for you, right?
Absolutely. Profit is not at all a bad word. As a matter of fact, a business just can't survive without it. So know your business model, know what your business can and cannot afford to do, knowing that profit needs to be there at all times just to sustain it, and make your decisions from there. And no, you said it well.
Brilliant. It's been a pleasure to chat.
Thank you, Rachel, for your time. It was a pleasure meeting you, and I love this conversation. So thanks so much.
My pleasure. Speak soon.
This was a fascinating listen. We, as always, have no idea where the guests take the subject. We especially loved the way we got to hear about mindset shifts and weaving that around financial responsibility, strategic decision making, small business profit, and so many other things. Please do let us know what you think. A massive thank you to both Kasey and Rachel for their time and engaging conversation. As always, their contact details are in the show notes, along with links to our website, future episodes, our donation page, and really useful links from the content which they spoke about. At Women Talking About Learning, We're really keen to showcase new and diverse voices talking about the things that matter in learning. We're especially looking for new voices and people who haven't done anything like this before. We're working out our plan for the next year, and the topics we're keen to look at include the education one, the data one, the HR one, the L&D community one, the L&D book one, the patriarchy one. If you're interested, then please do get in touch via email hello@larn.com. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, and next time it's the transition one. As always, thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon.